They had come to teach a lesson in gratitude. Commander Eva Rostova stood on the command deck of the human starship Veritas. Before them hung Oakhaven, a world of green continents and sapphire oceans, a jewel held in the velvet darkness of space. Below, a civilization of 6 million souls was slowly being strangled by kindness. The ship's primary viewer showed the elegant crystalline vessels of the Cathar Gratitude Compact, their ships like shards of obsidian glass. They had answered Oakhaven's desperate plea for aid after a stellar flare crippled their planetary grid. Now they were exacting their price. Rostova's jaw was a hard line. The stakes were not just one colony, but the very definition of help itself. She had reviewed the Cathar's initial treaty, a document dripping with magnanimous language that concealed 1,000 poisoned hooks. This would not be a battle of torpedoes and particle beams. It would be a war of procedure, a conflict fought in the cold, unforgiving light of a public inquiry. The air on the bridge was tight with unspoken tension, smelling of ozone and recycled oxygen. Proctor Valerius of the Cathar Compact is hailing us. Commander, Lieutenant Eris Thorne reported, his voice clipped. He's broadcasting on a channel reserved for diplomatic overtures. Very confident. Of course he is Aris, Rostova replied, her gaze fixed on the screen. He believes his legal framework is flawless. Put him through. She smoothed the front of her dark blue Federation uniform. Justice was a matter of mathematics, and the Cathar were master accountants. The face of Proctor Valerius shimmered into existence on the main viewer. He was a picture of serene superiority, his species' features a blend of avian grace and reptilian stillness. His skin was the color of polished jade, and his dark, almond-shaped eyes held no discernible pupils. He wore robes of shimmering silver that seemed to drink the light. Commander Rostova, he began, his voice a smooth, modulated baritone that carried no warmth. An unexpected pleasure. I trust you are here to observe the fruits of a successful collaboration, a testament to the power of mutual support. Proctor, Rostova said, her tone level and cold. I am here to review the terms of your collaboration. The Oakhaven government has filed a petition of duress with the Sol Federation. A lie, but a necessary one, to open the door. Valerius gave a slow, deliberate blink. It was the Cathar equivalent of a condescending smile. Duress, Commander, we saved this world. We rebuilt their power infrastructure, delivered critical medical supplies, and stabilized their orbital mechanics. We asked for nothing in return but gratitude. Your gratitude has a name, Proctor, Rostova countered. You call it the tithe, a permanent compounding tax on their entire planetary output. A debt freely accepted is a cage freely entered, a small price for survival, Valerius stated, his serenity unshaken. The tithe ensures that the lesson of interdependence is never forgotten. It is a sacrament of cosmic balance. They required aid. We provided it. Now they show their appreciation. It is the most natural law in the universe. Natural law doesn't require your citizens to wear collars of compliance to enforce it, Thorne interjected from his station, unable to restrain himself. Valerius's dark eyes shifted to the lieutenant. The collars are merely reminders, gentle instruments to help our new partners focus their efforts and meet their obligations. They ensure the smooth functioning of our covenant. There is no pain, Commander. Only a mild disincentive for unproductive behaviors. Rostova held up a hand, silencing Thorne. Proctor, we have fundamental disagreements about the definitions of gratitude and covenant. The Federation requests a full open inquiry into the Oakhaven Accords. We will present our findings to the Stellar Congress. Humanity did not cross the stars to learn new ways to kneel. The Proctor's expression did not change, but a new coldness entered his voice. An inquiry, On what grounds? Our agreements are matters of public record, ratified by the colony's own leadership when they were desperate. Buyer's remorse is not a valid legal argument. The validity of consent given under existential threat is, however, Rostova stated. We will be arriving in orbit to begin our audit. We expect your full cooperation. Cooperation is our creed, Commander. Valerius purred, the image dissolving. We have nothing to hide. The viewer returned to the placid image of Oakhaven. Rostova let out a slow breath. He's a snake wrapped in the letter of the law, she murmured. Veritas, what is your assessment? The ship's AI voice, calm and without inflection, emanated from the bridge's internal emitters. Proctor Valerius is operating within the known legal doctrines of the Cathar Compact. Their system is built on the principle of asymmetrical obligation. They view an unanswered cry for help as an implicit contract. The calculus is simple. The value of their aid is infinite, as it prevented total collapse. Therefore, any price they demand is by their logic less than infinite, and thus fundamentally fair. The numbers were a cage built to last an eternity. So they've weaponized charity, Rostova said, a bitter taste in her mouth. They create dependents, not partners. Correct, Commander, Veritas replied. Their expansion model is not conquest. It is acquisition through indebtedness. To defeat their argument, you must redefine the very concept of value. Rostova turned to her crew. Out, Petrova, she said, addressing the ship's xenosociologist, who had been observing quietly. I need you on the ground. Forget their laws and their treaties. I need to know the human cost. Talk to the people. Find out what those gentle reminders are really doing to them. Dr. Petrova, a woman with kind eyes and a core of steel, simply nodded. She knew her role was to provide the testimony that no legal document could capture. A ledger must count the tears as well as the coin. Aris Thorne plotted an orbital insertion course, the gentle hum of the ship's inertial dampeners the only sound. They were entering a battlefield where the only weapons were principles. Rostova watched the Cathar ships, their crystalline hulls seeming to mock the messiness of the human vessel. They were perfect clean and utterly predatory. The fight for Oakhaven had begun, and the first shot would be a conversation, an interview, a single line of testimony that could unravel an empire built on gratitude. Down on Oakhaven in the fertile plains of the planet's largest continent, a farmer named Elias checked the moisture levels of his soil. The air was sweet with the scent of blooming xenoflora. Before the Cathar, this had been his favorite time of day. Now a cold weight rested on his neck. The collar of compliance was smooth and cool against his skin, a perfect, seamless ring of silver metal. He barely noticed it anymore, not until he stopped working for more than the allotted rest period. Then a gentle, pervasive hum would start a sound that vibrated deep in his skull, making it impossible to think, to focus, to feel anything but a rising, frantic need to get back to work. It wasn't pain. It was worse. It was the theft of peace. His daughter ran out of their modest farmhouse, her laughter a bright, beautiful sound. She wore a smaller collar, given on her 10th birthday. A gift, the Cathar had called it, a sign of her entry into the community's obligations. Elias watched her play, and the sweet air tasted like ash in his mouth. He had to produce 12% more grain this cycle. The tithe had increased. A cost had to be paid for every choice. Dr. Lena Petrova sat in a dimly lit room that served as a town hall, the air thick with the smell of dust and fear. She listened to the stories of the Oakhaven colonists, her datapad recording every word. An old woman described the focusing hum of the collar that had erased her ability to paint her hands, now too unsteady. A young man spoke of the sleep optimization function that woke him with a jolt of neural energy if he slept more than the prescribed 6 hours. They were not slaves in name, but their very biology was being managed, their time and energy metered out like currency. The Cathar had engineered a system of perfect, frictionless exploitation. There was no whip, only a quiet, insistent hum that guided you back to the path of productivity. Every law is a promise, and this one promised only servitude. Petrova transmitted her initial findings back to the Veritas. "Commander," she reported via a secure channel. "The situation is more insidious than we imagined. The collars aren't just for enforcement. They're behavioral modification devices, slowly eroding the colonists' capacity for dissent or even independent thought. They are being conditioned to find relief only in labor." Aboard the Veritas, Rostova reviewed the report, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of a console. "They aren't just taxing their resources," she said to Thorn. "They are taxing their souls." "It's diabolical," Thorn agreed, his usual tactical composure strained. "It's all framed as beneficial. Increased productivity, better health outcomes, societal harmony. Every legal document the Cathar have filed is filled with this wellness language. How do we fight that? We don't fight their words," Rostova declared, a cold fire in her eyes. "We mirror their actions. We show the galaxy the truth behind the elegant facade. Veritas begin compiling a public ledger. Every calorie of energy Oakhaven produces, every liter of water, every man-hour of labor. We are going to count everything." "Ledger initiated, Commander," the AI's voice responded. "I will also collate Cathar, economic data from adjacent systems. I am projecting a pattern of resource acquisition consistent with parasitic societal models." The first escalation came sooner than expected. Proctor Valerius hailed them again, his serene expression unchanged. "Commander Rostova, your presence is proving to be a distraction for the good people of Oakhaven. Your interviews are causing unrest and inefficiency. This disruption has a cost. As per the Accords, any external factor that negatively impacts planetary output must be compensated for. I have just authorized a 2% increase in the gratitude tithe, effective immediately." He was using their own investigation as leverage against the people they were trying to help. A cage of logic needs no bars. Rostova's anger was a cold, sharp point. She had expected this, but the sheer arrogance of it still stung. "Proctor, you are penalizing a civilian population for our legal and diplomatic presence. That is a violation of interstellar norms." "Not at all," Valerius corrected smoothly. "We are simply balancing the ledger. Your actions have created a debt. That debt must be honored. The math, as always, is impeccable." The transmission ended. "He's baiting us," Thorn said, slamming a fist lightly on his console. "He wants us to make a move. Fire a warning shot, something he can use to paint us as aggressors. And we won't give him the satisfaction," Rostova stated. Her mind was racing, connecting threads of law testimony and Cathar procedure. "He thinks this is a game of economic pressure. We need to change the game entirely." She looked at the star chart at the vast emptiness between systems. An idea was forming a wild and desperate gambit. It was a strategy born of human history of courtroom drama and public spectacle. The law was not just a weapon. It was a stage. You just had to build it right. "Aris, what do you know about the old Traverse Accords? Specifically Article 117, the Corridor of Inquiry Clause?" she asked. Thorn's eyebrows shot up. "Commander, that's archaic. It hasn't been successfully invoked in 2 centuries. It's a procedural nightmare. It requires the establishment of a neutral arbitration zone, a quorum of witnesses from 3 different recognized powers, and a direct petition to the Stellar Congress adjudicators. But is it still law? Rostova pressed. Technically, yes, Thorn admitted, but the Cathar would never agree to it. It's designed to force transparency on a scale they would find abhorrent. They won't have to agree, Rostova said, a grim smile touching her lips. The clause can be triggered unilaterally if there is sufficient evidence of a sovereignty in abeyance crisis. Dr. Petrova's reports are that evidence. The Cathar have subverted Oakhaven's government so completely that the colony no longer has the capacity to represent itself. A truth spoken at the right time is the most powerful weapon. Veritas begin drafting the petition, Rostova commanded. Cite every precedent. We're not just auditing them anymore. We're putting the entire Cathar doctrine of gratitude on trial. The ship's internal systems hummed with new purpose. Data streams flowed, legal arguments were constructed, and formal notices were prepared for transmission across the interstellar network. They were no longer reacting to the Cathar's moves. They were setting the board for a whole new game, one the Cathar had never been forced to play, one where the numbers on the ledger had to account for human dignity. The formal summons broadcast on all public diplomatic channels sent a ripple of shock through the sector. The Sol Federation, under the authority of the starship Veritas, had invoked Article 117. It was an audacious move, a legal maneuver so archaic and aggressive that most diplomats had forgotten it existed. It was the equivalent of throwing down a gauntlet in the middle of a delicate negotiation. The Cathar were now legally compelled to respond not to the Veritas, but to the Stellar Congress itself. To ignore the summons would be to declare themselves outside the bounds of interstellar law, a move that would jeopardize their trade agreements with dozens of other species. Rostova had forced them onto her stage. A reckoning cannot be postponed, only met. Proctor Valerius's response came within the hour. It was a simple public acknowledgement of the summons. The Cathar Gratitude Compact welcomes this opportunity to demonstrate the unimpeachable integrity of our methods, the message stated. We will of course participate fully in this historical exercise. We are confident that any impartial review will vindicate our actions and highlight the profound benefits of our partnerships. The message was laced with contempt, but it was an acceptance nonetheless. He can't show weakness, Thorn analyzed, reading the subtext. His entire culture is based on an unassailable sense of superiority. He believes he can dismantle our case piece by piece in a public forum. That's exactly what I'm counting on, Rostova said. He needs to speak his philosophy out loud. He needs to explain to a galactic audience why a collar that steals a person's rest is a gift. A mirror held up to a monster reveals its true face. The second escalation was far more personal. A priority message flashed on Rostova's command console. It was from the Cathar security attachment on Oakhaven. Commander Rostova, the message began, displaying the impassive jade-colored face of a Cathar officer. We have taken Dr. Lena Petrova into protective custody. She has been formally charged with inciting civil unrest and interfering with a lawful economic enterprise under the statutes of the Oakhaven Cathar Sovereignty Accord. She will be held pending the resolution of your inquiry. The screen went blank. Thorn swore under his breath. They've taken a hostage, a legal hostage. Rostova's blood ran cold. Petrova was their direct link to the human cost on the planet. Without her testimony, their case was weaker. More importantly, one of her people was now in the hands of an enemy that saw individuals as mere entries in a ledger. The weight of command settled on her shoulders, heavier than a mountain. Veritas spoke its voice, a calm counterpoint to the rising tension. Commander, the Cathar have calculated that your operational doctrine prioritizes the safety of your crew above strategic objectives. They predict you will now withdraw the inquiry in exchange for Dr. Petrova's safe return. The AI was right. It was the logical, predictable move. It was the move Valerius expected from a sentimental, emotional human. He had laid a perfect trap. He was counting on her compassion as a weakness. "They have made a grave mathematical error," Rostova said, her voice dangerously quiet. She looked at Thorn, her eyes blazing with a resolve that startled him. "They have mistaken a human value for a human flaw." She activated the ship-wide address. "This is Commander Rostova. The Cathar Compact has illegally detained Dr. Petrova in an attempt to silence our investigation and intimidate this crew. They believe this will make us retreat. They are wrong." Her voice resonated through every corridor of the Veritas. "We will not abandon our people, and we will not abandon our principles. We will proceed with the corridor of inquiry. We will win her freedom not through negotiation or retreat, but by dismantling the unjust system that holds her captive. We will turn the full light of galactic law upon them until they have nowhere left to hide. There is no victory in a bargain with tyrants." She cut the channel. "Aris, get me a line to the neutral zone arbiters. Tell them the Inquiribara proceeds as scheduled, and add a charge to the docket unlawful imprisonment of a diplomatic attaché." She turned her gaze back to the viewer, to the crystalline Cathar ships hanging in the void. They thought they were dealing with sentimentalists. They were about to learn they were dealing with the inheritors of a species that had perfected the art of righteous fury. The Sol Federation teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. A civilian vignette from a nearby trading outpost, Relay Station 734, flickered across a secondary monitor. A grizzled human freighter captain was talking to a multi-limbed alien merchant. "Did you hear the Federation ship Veritas is calling out the Cathar? Invoked Article 117. The merchant hissed, a gesture of surprise. "The Gratitude Compact. Their contracts are iron. No one challenges them." The human took a long drink of his synthale. "Yeah, well, someone's doing it now. About time, too. I've seen worlds they've helped. They look peaceful, but they're hollowed out, like a beautiful apple with a worm inside." The merchant shuddered. "This will be a battle of old magic against new math." The human captain grunted. "Hope the humans have a good calculator." The cost of silence is always paid by the innocent. The neutral arbitration zone was established in the data space of a dormant stellar comms relay, a ghost station floating in the silent darkness between systems. It was a place of pure information, where avatars would meet in a simulated environment of absolute neutrality. The Veritas and the Cathar fleet held their positions miles of cold vacuum separating them, but their digital proxies were about to collide. Rostova Thorn and the ship's legal counsel prepared in the Veritas's briefing room. They would appear as themselves, their forms rendered in perfect fidelity. The Cathar, led by Proctor Valerius, would do the same. Witnesses were logging in from across the sector, a stoic silicon-based life form from the Cygnus expanse, a swirling gas entity representing the Orion Commerce Guild, and the designated adjudicator from the Stellar Congress, a being of pure energy encased in a shimmering containment field. Rostova's avatar materialized in the virtual chamber. It was a stark, minimalist space, a circular platform suspended in a representation of the cosmic microwave background. There were no chairs, no tables, only the participants standing in a circle under the cold, impartial gaze of the simulated starfield. Proctor Valerius appeared opposite her, his silver robe seeming to flow even in the non-existent breeze. His jade-like face was a mask of placid confidence. "Commander," he began, his voice echoing slightly in the virtual space. "An impressive commitment to archaic theater. Shall we begin? We shall proctor." Rostova replied, her voice ringing with clarity. The Federation is here to argue that the Cathar Gratitude Compact engages in a form of predatory societal subjugation disguised as benevolence. We will show that your covenants are instruments of perpetual servitude, and that your methods violate the foundational principles of sentient autonomy. Valerius made a gesture of open-handed innocence. Strong words, Commander, but words are not facts. The facts are simple. We answer calls for help. We provide aid. We ask for a return on that investment. A simple, elegant equation that has brought stability and prosperity to dozens of systems. Our first piece of evidence, Rostova announced, is the device you call the Collar of Compliance. We contend it is not a tool of focus, but an instrument of control, a tool that punishes rest and re-engineers the very neurology of its wearer to serve your economic model. Justice must be seen, not just declared. An inflammatory interpretation, Valerius countered smoothly. The collars merely encourage alignment with communal goals. They are a gift promoting the virtues of diligence and contribution. Do you have a single verified instance of a collar inflicting physical harm? He knew from his own records that they did not. The collars were designed to be psychologically coercive, not physically damaging. It was a perfect legal loophole. We have something more valuable than medical records, Proctor, Rostova said, her gaze unwavering. We have testimony. But before we hear it, I want this inquiry to understand the subject matter directly. She paused, letting the silence hang in the virtual chamber. Adjudicator, I request that Proctor Valerius, as the representative of the Cathar Compact, demonstrate the function of a collar of compliance for this court. A ripple of surprise went through the observers. Valerius's serene expression tightened almost imperceptibly. That is an unusual request. The device is calibrated for the specific physiology of our partners. It would be meaningless on me. Then calibrate one. Rostova pressed her voice like ice. You claim it is a gentle reminder, a gift. Surely you would not hesitate to receive such a gift yourself here before this distinguished quorum. Unless, of course, there is something about its function you would prefer this inquiry not to witness firsthand. The trap was sprung. Valerius was caught between his own lofty descriptions and the reality of the device. To refuse would be a tacit admission of deceit. To accept would be to subject himself to the very control he imposed on others. The adjudicator's shimmering form pulsed. Proctor Valerius, the request is unorthodox, but it is relevant. The nature of this device is central to the Federation's claim. Please proceed. Valerius was cornered. A faint, almost imperceptible sheen of moisture appeared on his jade-like brow. He had walked into a human trap, one not of violence or overt force, but of simple mirrored logic. He had to demonstrate his own medicine, and Rostova knew with icy certainty that it was a poison he would never willingly swallow. The proctor stood frozen for a long moment, the silence of the virtual chamber stretching into an eternity. His entire legal strategy, his civilization's entire philosophy, was balanced on the head of this single simple request. Show us, he was being told. Show us all the meaning of your gratitude. Every system has a failsafe, and for tyranny, it was the truth. With a flick of his wrist, a Cathar technician manifested a shimmering silver ring of light in the virtual space before Proctor Valerius. It was an exact replica of the collars of compliance. The proctor's serene mask had cracked, revealing a flicker of something cold and sharp beneath. He had spent his entire career on the other side of this equation, defining the terms, setting the price. Now he was being asked to pay it. The first rule of power is that its instruments are meant for others. This is a procedural mockery, Valerius stated, his voice losing its silken edge. a stunt designed to inflame sentiment, not to ascertain fact. The adjudicator's form pulsed with gentle, implacable light. The fact we wish to ascertain, Proctor, is the experience of this device. Your marketing materials describe it as a wellness tool. The Federation describes it as an instrument of control. The discrepancy is mutable. Please proceed with the demonstration. The law, when cornered, has only two choices: bend or break. Rostova watched, her expression unreadable. She did not need to speak. The trap, once set, worked on its own. Valerius, seeing no escape, gave a stiff, formal nod. The virtual collar floated over and settled around his neck. It glowed softly, a halo of subjugation. For a moment, nothing happened. Valerius almost managed a look of smug vindication. "The device is inactive, Proctor," Rostova said, her voice cutting through the silence. "It requires a parameter, a task. Let us use one of yours. The Oakhaven colonists are often tasked with focused ideological recitation. You will now articulate for 5 minutes the core tenets of the Gratitude Compact. You must not pause for more than 3 seconds nor deviate from the subject. A simple task for one, so versed in the topic, I'm sure." Valerius's eyes narrowed. He began to speak, reciting the polished, grandiose phrases that were the bedrock of his civilization's philosophy. "The universe is an ecosystem of exchange," he began, his voice regaining its rhythm. "Need is a vacuum, and aid is the pressure that fills it. This act of filling creates an immutable bond, a debt of existence." He was smooth practiced. He spoke for a full minute, his words a river of self-serving logic. But Rostova saw the subtle tension in his jaw. The constant, unbroken speech was unnatural. The pressure was building. He reached the 2-minute mark, and his flow began to falter. He was describing the tithe as a sacrament of balance, when he hesitated, searching for the next perfectly crafted platitude. In that 4-second pause, the collar activated. It did not spark or shock. Instead, a low, discordant hum filled the virtual chamber, a sound that seemed to vibrate inside the listener's very skull. Valerius flinched. His eyes lost focus for a split second, a look of profound internal disorientation crossing his features. He tried to speak again, but his words were disjointed. The balance. It requires focus." The hum intensified, not in volume, but in its invasive quality. It was the sound of a thought being derailed, of a mind being gently but relentlessly pushed off its tracks. Valerius put a hand to his temple, his serene composure shattering. The audience saw it all. This wasn't pain. This was the theft of self. "It disrupts," he stammered now, fully abandoning his recitation. I cannot formulate." He was fighting his own mind, and losing. A true cage needs no lock, only a broken key. With a strangled cry of fury and humiliation, Valerius reached up and tore the virtual collar from his neck. It dissipated into pixels. He stood there breathing heavily, his jade skin flushed. The mask was gone. In its place was the raw, naked rage of a predator whose prey had just bitten back. "This inquiry is a farce," he snarled, his voice a venomous hiss. "A violation of our sovereignty and a deliberate act of diplomatic aggression." Before the adjudicator could respond, Valerius's avatar vanished. The connection was severed. Rostova knew what was coming next. Humiliation was a debt the Cathar always repaid with interest. The third escalation was immediate and brutal. All channels from Oakhaven were suddenly jammed, replaced by a single high-priority broadcast from the Cathar command vessel. Proctor Valerius's face appeared no longer serene, but cold and hard as diamond. "Commander Rostova," he announced, his voice devoid of any pretense of civility. "Your actions have created a profound imbalance. The people of Oakhaven have been infected with the virus of dissent. A period of intensive re-education and compliance reinforcement is now necessary. The view shifted. It showed a public square in Oakhaven's capital city. Dr. Lena Petrova stood on a raised platform, flanked by 2 imposing Cathar guards. A collar of compliance was fastened around her neck. "This human, your agent," Valerius continued, "will be the first to receive this corrective gift. Furthermore, the tithe for all of Oakhaven is increased by 20% effective immediately to compensate for this disruption. Withdraw your vessel and your baseless claims, or we will demonstrate the price of ingratitude on a planetary scale." A cornered beast does not bargain. It bites. On the bridge of the Veritas, the air was frozen. Thorn stared at the screen, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. He's going to use her as an example. He's going to activate that thing on her live for the whole sector to see. Rostova's heart hammered against her ribs, but her voice was steady. She had anticipated an escalation, but not one so nakedly cruel. Valerius had abandoned the law and embraced pure intimidation. He thought he was putting her in an impossible position, save her officer or save the planet. "Veritas," she said, her voice low and sharp. "What did our public ledger record during Proctor Valerius's broadcast?" The AI's calm voice was a stark contrast to the horror on the screen. During his 5-second transmission, the Cathar fleet's energy consumption spiked by 1.2 terawatts. They are drawing power from Oakhaven's planetary grid and a nearby gas giant to power the planetary collar network and their own enhanced shield arrays. The ledger is tracking every joule. Rostova looked at the tactical display. Energy transfer conduits invisible to the naked eye were represented as glowing lines flowing from the planet to the Cathar fleet. The Cathar had built a system to drain a world. And a system built to drain can also be a system built to fill. A plan audacious and terrifying solidified in her mind. A lesson must be taught with the tools of the student. "He wants to teach us about costs, Aris," Rostova said, her eyes fixed on the energy schematics. "Let's teach him about accounting." She turned to her tactical officer. "Prepare the ship's primary deflector array. I want you to target the main Cathar energy converter. Do not fire a weapon. I want you to project a feedback loop." Thorn blinked. "Commander, a feedback loop of that magnitude could return every watt of energy they are currently borrowing," Rostova finished for him. "With interest. Veritas, what is the total energy debt the Cathar have accumulated from Oakhaven since their arrival, according to our ledger?" "Calculating," the AI replied instantly. "Based on planetary output, tithe schedules, and covert energy draws, the accumulated debt is 9.8 zettajoules, a sum they intended to be unpayable." "They were right," Rostova murmured. "It is unpayable, but it can be returned." She looked at Thorn, her decision made. This is not an attack. This is a debt collection. A full, immediate, and public repayment of everything they have taken. We will not fire a single shot. We will give them back their own gift. Justice is not about punishment. It is about balance. The bridge of the Veritas became a whirlwind of focused activity. Engineers rerouted power, their voices a calm litany of technical jargon. Helmsmen corrected their position, aligning the ship perfectly. Thorn directed the targeting sensors, his fingers flying across his console. The maneuver was incredibly dangerous. Pushing that much energy through the deflector dish would strain the ship's systems to their breaking point. It was a move of desperation, a legal argument made with the raw power of a star. Down on Oakhaven, the farmer Elias fell to his knees as the collar around his neck hummed with a new, terrifying intensity. The air itself seemed to crackle with oppressive energy. His daughter cried out, clutching her own collar. Across the planet, 6 million people felt the grip of the Cathar tighten a final, brutal lesson in obedience. Elias looked up at the sky at the distant point of light that was the human ship. He closed his eyes, a single thought of despair passing through his mind. They failed. Aboard the Veritas, a klaxon blared once, signaling imminent systems overload. "Deflector dish is at maximum charge, Commander," Thorne yelled over the alarm. "The conduits are glowing red. They won't hold for long." On the main viewer, Valerius's broadcast continued. He was making a speech gesturing towards Dr. Petrova. "Let this be a lesson in the futility of resistance. Now, Aris," Rostova commanded, her voice cutting through the noise. "Balance the ledger." Thorne slammed his palm down on the activation panel. The Veritas shuddered, a deep groaning vibration that shook the entire vessel. A beam of pure white gold energy, silent and brilliant, erupted from the ship's main deflector. It was not a weapon. It was a river of light, a torrent of raw power that struck the central Cathar vessel, not with concussive force, but with the irresistible pressure of a tidal wave. It poured into the very energy conduits the Cathar were using to drain Oakhaven. The system designed only for one-way traffic was suddenly forced into a violent, catastrophic reverse. Simultaneously, Veritas hijacked the Cathar broadcast frequency. The image of Valerius was replaced by a simple stark text display visible to the entire sector, to the adjudicator, to the quorum of witnesses. It was a live feed of the public ledger. A single entry was being written in real time. Debtor Cathar Gratitude, Compact Creditor, Oakhaven Colony. Transaction repayment in full. Amount 9.8 zetajoules. Status processing. The effect on the Cathar fleet was instantaneous and devastating. Their elegant crystalline ships, now conduits for an unimaginable energy surplus, began to glow. First a dull cherry red, then a blinding incandescent white. Alarms shrieked across their open comm channels, a chorus of panic and disbelief. Their systems weren't being destroyed. They were being drowned in the very power they had stolen. On the bridge of his flagship, Valerius could only watch as every console exploded in a shower of sparks, his perfect orderly system undone by its own flawless efficiency. The price of the lesson was the lesson itself. On Oakhaven, the suffocating pressure vanished in an instant. The collars around every neck went dark and silent, falling away in two neat halves. Their internal power sources flash-fried. A moment of stunned silence swept across the planet, followed by a tentative cheer that grew into a planetary roar of triumph and relief in the capital city. Petrova's Cathar guards collapsed as their ship's systems failed, and she was swarmed by jubilant colonists. The Veritas groaned the feedback from the energy discharge, causing lights to flicker and fail across the bridge. The smell of ozone was thick in the air. "Damage report," Rostova ordered, her hands gripping the command chair to steady herself. "Primary energy conduits have sustained microfractures," Thorne reported, his voice shaky but triumphant. "We're down to 80% power. She'll need a full yard overhaul. But Commander, it worked. The Cathar fleet is dead in the water. All power systems are offline. They're not destroyed, just disconnected." The cost of victory is always written in the ship's own hull. Rostova allowed herself a single deep breath. They had won, not by destroying their enemy, but by forcing them to choke on the fruits of their own avarice. The virtual inquiry chamber reappeared on her console. The adjudicator's shimmering form was there, along with the stunned witnesses. The public ledger entry now read, "Transaction complete. Gratitude returned." The adjudicator's voice resonated with a new profound gravity. The evidence presented, both procedural and practical, is conclusive. The Cathar Gratitude Compact has been found to operate a system of predatory subjugation under the guise of law. Their methods are a perversion of interstellar covenant. The formal verdict was swift and absolute. A new entry began to form on the Stellar Congress's permanent public ledger, visible to all. Precedent lock. The doctrine known as the gratitude tithe is hereby outlawed as a mechanism of sovereignty theft. All extant treaties based on this doctrine are declared void. The use of neurologically coercive devices for purposes of economic or behavioral enforcement is permanently banned under penalty of full congressional sanction. The words burned in the data space, a new law, forged in the light of a mirrored truth. A message arrived from a freed Dr. Petrova on the planet's surface. "We're safe, Commander. Everyone is celebrating." She paused, her voice turning somber. "But there's a cost down here, too. Some of the colonists, the ones who lived under the collars the longest, they're lost. They don't know how to function without the hum guiding them. We've freed their bodies, but their minds are still in chains. It will take a generation to heal." Rostova looked at the image of Oakhaven, a world scarred but free. She felt the dull ache of the ship around her, a vessel wounded in the act of liberation. The victory was real, but it was not clean. Justice rarely is. She stood on the bridge, watching her crew begin the slow, careful work of recovery. The scent of ozone had been replaced by the faint metallic smell of stressed circuitry. The ship was quiet now, a tired and noble silence. On the main viewer, the public ledger entry blinked with a final solid green light. Confirmed. Outside in the cold void, the mirror arrays on the Veritas that had focused the beam of repayment retracted slowly, their incandescent surfaces dimming to a dull, satisfied gray. Justice is not a sword. A sword can be broken. It is a mirror held up to the face of a tyrant. It shows them not what they could be, but what they are. It does not judge. It only reflects. It forces an accounting down to the last decimal point, and then it presents the bill for a crime that was never supposed to have a price. The ledger is balanced.